in the second half of the 4th millennium BC. That Mesopotamia had been the homeland of ancient civilizations was of course very well known for a long time. Babylon and Assyria were part of the historical picture of man based on classical writers in the Old Testament. Herodotus visited Babylon in 450 BC and described the great temple or ziggurat. There, he said that as a grain-bearing country, Assyria is the richest in the world. The figures given by Strabo and Herodotus for a yield of corn of 200 to 300 fold may have not been widely exaggerated. Jacobson has calculated from the cuneiform text that the yield of wheat in southern Iraq in 2400 BC could compare favourably with that of the best modern Canadian wheat fields, and this may well be one of the reasons for the growth and the flourishing of Sumerian civilization. The fertility and agricultural wealth of southern Mesopotamia when well farmed. The author should of course have said predisposing conditions rather than reasons. He did not want here or at any other point in this book to appear to slip into an easy economic or geographical determinism. The Jews had been captive in Babylon and by its waters had wept, the rivers of Babylon. Everyone knows the dramatic account of the Hebrew prophet Daniel, who was an unwilling guest at Belshazzar's feast. Belshazzar the king made a great feast to 1,000 of his lords and drank wine before the 1,000. During the feast Cyrus's men waded across the river and broke into the city. In the same hour came forth fingers of a man's hand and wrote upon the plaster of the wall of the king's palace. And this is the writing that was written. Mene, mene, tekel, Harston. This was in 538 BC. The Babylonians and Assyrians had ruled in Mesopotamia off and on since 2000 BC. Hammurabi was the greatest of the Babylonian kings and the author of the famous Code of Law, Hammurabi's Law, issued by him, to cause justice to prevail in the country, to destroy the wicked and evil, that the strong may not oppress the weak. Hammurabi's dates have long been a matter for discussion. Professor Sidney Smith argued for a long chronology, and his argument, which gave the date of Hammurabi's accession as 1792 BC, has much been strengthened by recent evidence. You may well ask, who were the Chaldeans and what exactly was Chaldea in the study of ancient peoples and early civilizations? Most people have heard of Abraham as living in Ur of the Chaldees, Genesis 11:28. The terms Chaldee, Chaldeans, Chaldea are frequent in the Old Testament, where they are used as equivalents for Babylonia and the Babylonians. The old term was Mat Kaldu. Possibly at one early stage the Chaldeans were a separate Semitic-speaking people, but soon in ancient history they were indistinguishable from the Semitic-speaking peoples of Babylon. So nowadays when we speak of the ancient peoples of Mesopotamia, we speak of Assyrians and Babylonians, rather than of Assyrians and Chaldeans. By the way, subsequently the word Chaldee was wrongly used for the Aramaic language itself, while in the book of Daniel and Herodotus, Strabo and Diodorus, it means astrologers and astronomers, and the term lived on for a long time to mean wise men. There are two special features which have for long been associated in the minds of historians and archaeologists with early Mesopotamia. The first is the presence of tells, or indications, or signs, or things left behind, from their day through to the present day history, right? And the second is cuneiform writing. Both need some brief words of explanation here. The early houses and temples of ancient Mesopotamia were built of clay, either of pise cob, which is roughly piled up earth, or of adobe, shapeless lumps of clay pressed together. Later, sun-dried bricks were used, and latest of all, kiln-fired bricks, which were naturally more durable, especially when joined together with bitumen. Kind of cement. These kiln-fired bricks were costly and reserved for the construction of temples and palaces. The great majority of Mesopotamian buildings were of clay or mud brick. Rain and natural usage wore these mud clay structures down, and it has been estimated that the average time span of a mud house in Mesopotamia would be about 75 years. New houses were built in a collapsed and scattered remains of the old houses, and so forth. These artificial and steadily accumulating mounds of successive settlements are called towns in Mesopotamia. This is incidentally a pre-Islamic word. This is before Islam went through there. And have other local names in other parts of the Near East, such as Tepe in northern Mesopotamia. That's the one that was found. And had those strange animals on it, etc. In Iran, Yuk, in Turkey. Sometimes they are very high indeed, and some of them, like Erbil, Old Arbela, and Kirkuk, are still lived in, or perhaps one should say lived on. They have been more or less continuously occupied from early times to the present day, perhaps for 6,000 to 8,000 years. These man-made settlement mounds, tells, tepes, are a feature of the archaeology of Iran, Iraq, Palestine and Turkey. They also occur in southern Russia and in Bulgaria. They are not a feature of the surviving parts of barbarian Western and Northern Western Europe, nor indeed of Egypt, where, as we shall see, traces of early settlements are difficult to find. Indeed, one American archaeologist working in Egypt, John Wilson, has called the early civilization of Egypt a civilization without cities. But where towns do occur, they are an obvious place for the antiquary and traveller interested in the past, and for the modern archaeologist with his trenches, sondages and large-scale excavations. This is why accounts of excavations in the Near East are full of numbered levels like Uruk 18, Tepe Gora 12, a Ninevite 3, and so on. There's a map. Distribution of non-cuneiform scripts of the Near East Bronze Age after the Pope. The two large tells near Hilah in Babylonia and near Mosul in Assyria were pointed to in Jewish and Arab tradition as the sites of Babylon and Nineveh. And these and other sites were visited by European travellers from the 12th century onwards. These travellers often collected bricks and pots, hoods and fragments of tablets from these tells. An Italian nobleman, Pietro della Valle, who wrote a most entertaining account of his journey across Mesopotamia, brought back to Europe in 1625 some baked clay tablets on which were writings in certain unknown characters. This was cuneiform writing, the oldest writing in the world. So it's older than the Egyptian, it predates the Egyptian. The Sumerians wrote on clay with a stylus made of a reed or wood. The first signs set down were pictographic, a kind of picture writing as used by the Chinese. Later the Babylonians used the stylus for setting down a syllabic script. The cut edge of the reed stylus made wedge-shaped impressions, and hence the name cuneiform for this earliest writing. But it was not only on clay tablets that this cuneiform writing occurred. There were also monumental inscriptions. Faced with the writings on monuments and tablets, the learned world of Western Europe began to realise that here was a mystery and a new field for scientific exploration. It's the steles, rocks, caves, etc. talks here about Rawlinson, who succeeded in translating the first two paragraphs of the cuneiform inscription in Old Persian. In 1846, the Royal Asiatic Society published in 2 volumes the Persian cuneiform inscription at Behistun, which was a complete translation of the Old Persian text, and in the same year Dr. Edward Hincks published an independent translation in the Transactions of the Royal Irish Academy. When the Babylonian inscription was available, Rawlinson, Hincks, and others including Oppert, De Saulcy and Fox Talbot, worked at its decipherment. Soon this was done and the key to Babylonian and Assyrian obtained, but not everyone was satisfied that this was so. When in 1857 Rawlinson translated for the British Museum an inscription on a cylinder of Tiglath-Pileser I, there was some discussion, and before publication it was decided to ask Hincks, Fox Talbot and Oppert to translate the inscription independently, and this they did. Rawlinson's translation and the 3 others were sent in sealed envelopes to the President of the Royal Asiatic Society, who had them examined by a select committee. The committee reported that the translations were so alike that there could be no longer any doubt that the true key to the decipherment of cuneiform writing had been found. This was, in the first place, the key to the cuneiform writings of the Babylonians and Assyrians. It took Mesopotamian history back to 2000 BC, but it was also a key to something else, to the Sumerians, whose existence in the land of Shinar no one at that time suspected, except perhaps for Edward Hincks, who with great acumen pointed out that the Semitic-speaking Babylonians could not have been the originators of the cuneiform form of writing, which they themselves used. Babylonian, he argued, was a syllabic writing, and he thought that the cuneiform script was borrowed from an earlier people without syllabic writing. In this he was right, but he posed the question: who were these people? Were they possibly earlier people who lived in the south of Mesopotamia? Serious excavations in Mesopotamia began in 1843 when P.E. Botta, the French consular agent at Mosul, started digging in the Mount of Kuyunchik across the Tigris from Mosul. While excavating there late in 1842 and early in 1843, he learned of sculptured stones found in the mounds of Khorsabad, 14 miles to the north, and at the end of March began work there. Within a week he had discovered the remains of a huge Assyrian palace with large sculptured slabs and cuneiform inscriptions. At once he sent a telegram to Paris. Nineveh is that like French or something? Must be French. Yeah. Nineveh has been retrieved probably. Actually, Botta was mistaken. Khorsabad was not Nineveh but Sharukin, the city of one of the greatest Assyrian kings, Sargon II, 721 to 705 BC, and it was Sargon II's palace that Botta had found. Nineveh was in fact the site of Kuyunchik, which he had abandoned, but this did not matter. What mattered was that the spade was being used to examine the tales of Mesopotamia. In 1845, Henry Layard began work at Nimrud, and in the 1850s Botta was succeeded by Place, and was it actually Place or Place? Some other funny name like that. And Layard by his former assistant Hormuzd